As I flipped over the letter handed to me by the mail carrier, I saw the name Maria written on it.
Maria!
I exclaimed aloud, unintentionally. I hurried back to the living room. I wondered why I was receiving a letter from Maria now. There's no use just thinking about it. I carefully opened the letter. Inside were several sheets of letters and others. As I took them out and began to read, I pictured Maria's face in my mind. To Mom. The letter explained the circumstances that had led to Maria's current situation. And at the end, it contained these words. Please avenge my husband for me. That's my final request. Love, Maria. As I finished reading, tears fell onto the table. Overwhelmed with frustration and nowhere to direct it, I clenched the letter in my hand. At the same time, I resolved to avenge Maria in her stead. Joseph Ford, you were just pretending to be a good person. Not realizing it was my mistake. So, I'll commend you for deceiving me until just now. But that's where it ends. You made a terrible mistake. I'll make you regret taking away my beloved daughter until the end of your life. I bit my lip and reached for my smartphone. My name is Kelly Turner. I work as an insurance agent at a major insurance company. After being widowed young, I worked tirelessly for the sake of my daughter, Maria. It was hard, but thinking of Maria always gave me the strength to persevere. Then, about 6 months ago, Maria told me she was getting married.
So, Maria's at that age now.
She had just turned 24. At 53, I was feeling my age more and more. But there was no time to rest. Marriage is expensive, after all.
Maria's wedding is next month. I can't afford to take a break now.
I wanted to help with the wedding expenses and prepare a celebration. Maybe soon, I'll even have grandchildren. It was a struggle, but also incredibly joyful. But tragedy often strikes during times of happiness. That's exactly what happened to me that day with a phone call.
Maria?
The voice on the other end was a police officer. With a somber tone, he informed me that Maria had passed away. I was in shock, dropping my smartphone to the ground. Maria was about to get married. How could this happen? My mind raced with thoughts. Then, about a week later, I unexpectedly received a letter from Maria. Reading that letter, I learned for the first time about the circumstances of her death. The letter began with how Maria met Joseph Ford, her would-be husband. I heard that they met at a Western-style pastry shop where Maria had gotten a job. Maria had always loved baking. Probably because her best friend's family owned a cake shop. She got interested in baking after tasting delicious sweets and started making them herself. So then, after high school, Maria attended a local pastry school. Then got a job at a pastry company that had several stores in the county.
Nice to meet you. I'm Joseph Ford, your mentor. I'm only a bit senior to you, but feel free to approach me casually.
Joseph, a slightly older colleague, became Maria's mentor when she started her job. He was apparently the son of the owner of the pastry company that ran the shop where Maria worked. By the way, whenever Maria was scolded by other seniors, Joseph immediately came to her defense.
Don't be too hard on her, she just started.
Of course, everyone knew Joseph was the owner's son. So no one dared to contradict him. On her end, Maria found Joseph's protective nature very reassuring. It was only a matter of time before their professional trust evolved into romantic feelings. About a year after Maria started her job, Joseph confessed his feelings to her. That led to them dating and gradually growing closer. But Maria wasn't just caught up in romance. She was serious about her job as a pastry chef. She followed Joseph's and her superior's instructions at work and practiced after hours to improve her skills. Sometimes, Joseph would join her for practice. It became a crucial part of their growing relationship. By the time they started dating, Maria had become a competent pastry chef. But all this turned out to be part of Joseph's scheme. Maria only discovered this after they began their relationship. Time passed, and a few months ago, Joseph brought up a significant matter with Maria.
Maria, you know there's a sweets exhibition in 3 months, right? I need to talk to you about that. The sweets exhibition? At the department store near the station? That's where popular Western-style pastry shops sell their sweets, right? Yeah, that one. Apparently, there's a last-minute vacancy, and our shop is going to participate.
Joseph sounded a bit troubled as he spoke. Maria tilted her head. Our shop is popular, isn't it? Is there something wrong? We need to come up with a new dessert. And we also have to create something for the next season. Maria nodded in understanding. Pastry shops often release new products for each season, like special sweets for Valentine's Day or Christmas. The wedding is in 2 months, and I can't take on more than this. That's why I need a good idea from you. Joseph pleaded, clasping his hands together. Maria sighed softly. All right, I'll bring my recipe notebook tomorrow.
That would be a huge help.
Make sure to tell everyone that the idea came from me. That was the extent of their conversation that day. However, the following day, an incident occurred. After work, Maria went to the kitchen, holding her recipe notebook. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said as she entered. But Joseph wasn't there. Is he still working? She wondered, thinking he might be busy since he was the heir to the business. So, she decided to wait for him. When she was looking through her notebook, that's when she felt someone's presence behind her. Joseph? Were you working? Maria turned around. But Joseph wasn't there. Oh? Miss Turner? What are you doing here? Oh, Mr. Broke. It was Mr. Broke. He was an employee of the pastry company, but not a pastry chef. He was more of an office worker, handling tasks like accounting. It seemed he had come to lock up. Do you have some business here still? Yes, I was supposed to help Joseph with something. Mr. Ford's? Oh, I see. Mr. Broke smirked. It was seemingly harboring ill intentions. Maria sensed this sharply and became visibly annoyed. Suddenly, Mr. Broke raised his voice.
Even if you're dating the boss's son, such behavior from an employee is unacceptable. I didn't do anything wrong. Quiet. Don't make excuses.
Mr. Broke advanced towards her rapidly. In a panic, Maria threw her recipe notebook at him.
Ah!
Mr. Broke clutched his face and crouched down. That's when Joseph arrived. What happened? I heard a loud noise. Maria, are you okay?
Joseph! It's just that.
Maria explained the situation to Joseph. However, nothing significant had happened. Mr. Broke had just learned that Maria and Joseph were meeting, and let his imagination run wild, leading to this misunderstanding. Maria was upset by his odd suspicions. And Mr. Broke, feeling offended, had tried to scold her. So I ended up throwing the recipe notebook, and Mr. Broke ended up like this. I'm sorry. Maria apologized and looked down. Meanwhile, Joseph checked on Mr. Broke's condition. The area hit by the notebook had turned red. But fortunately, there were no serious injuries.
I'm reporting this to the president. You'll be fired immediately for this. That can't be. Quiet. Be prepared for it.
Mr. Broke shouted. And quickly left the kitchen.
What should we do, Joseph?
Don't worry. I'll take care of it.
But what if your father hears about it?
Their relationship might be opposed by Joseph's father. Maria feared it the most. Don't worry. I will always protect you, Maria. Joseph. Leave it to me. After that incident, it seems the whole matter reached the president's ears. But Maria wasn't reprimanded. All thanks to Joseph's intervention. He had protected her. Maria thought so. This incident brought them even closer together. Yet, all of this was part of Joseph's scheme. A few days later, Maria came to realize the whole truth. After the kitchen scuffle, Joseph said to Maria, I feel bad asking this, but can you keep quiet about the idea you provided? Why? You know, because of the Mr. Broke incident. On the day of the incident, Joseph was alone in the kitchen. While he was working on a new creation, Mr. Broke came into the kitchen. There was an accident, and some cooking equipment hit Mr. Broke's face. That's the story Joseph wanted to go with. Maria reluctantly nodded. Sorry, Maria. I know it's actually your recipe. And I'll definitely return your recipe notebook later. No, it's okay. You went through all that trouble to cover for me. Yeah, well. If we're going with that story, Mr. Broke had to be somehow convinced. Joseph talked about the effort he put in to make the story work. Maria was very grateful to Joseph for going to such lengths for her. However, a few days later, as Maria was leaving late after cleaning up, she finished changing and was about to leave when she passed the office. She heard Joseph's voice inside.
Joseph still here? Just drop by, I might.
Maria decided to enter. But as she approached, Joseph's words stopped her in her tracks. Yeah, it worked out great, thanks to you, Mr. Broke. Mr. Broke? What does that mean? Maria listened intently to Joseph's voice. Soon, she heard his laughter. And followed by his true feelings. Maria is just a convenient tool. Now that I've got the recipe, she's useless. Maria was stunned. I was being deceived? Covering my mouth, I tried desperately to keep quiet. But I couldn't stop the tears from overflowing. That recipe is really good. It's a waste to just leave it with her. She could only hear Joseph's cheerful voice spilling out the truth she didn't want to hear. He had ordered other seniors to scold Maria. Then intervened himself to gain her trust. He even incited Mr. Broke, making Maria feel indebted and unable to leave. He was glad he had managed to take her recipe during the commotion. Joseph talked about his plot. Then, he added, "If she tries to run away, I'll just confront her with a shocking truth." Joseph grinned. While she was wondering what he meant, Joseph answered himself. "Oh, it's fraud. She doesn't realize it, but she's already complicit." Joseph laughed through his nose. Just then, her smartphone fell out of my pocket. There was a clatter as Joseph noticed it, and he put his phone on the desk. His actions were visible through the gap in the door. "I have to run," she thought, but her legs wouldn't move. Soon, Joseph found her. He looked at her menacingly.
Were you listening? I was just. Well, it doesn't matter. If you try to run, I'll just report you.
Joseph smiled. Maria felt an immense fear at his smile. After that, unable to escape from Joseph, Maria lived as he dictated. She was also forced to openly assist in his fraud. But the kind-hearted Maria couldn't endure such a life. Finally, about a month later, Maria was found on the first floor of her apartment building. No witnesses, but a passerby had heard a loud noise. When they checked, they found Maria lying below her apartment. The police said it was likely she did it herself. However, next to her, Joseph's laptop was found. Maria might have wanted to expose Joseph's wrongdoing by doing that. But when the police examined the laptop, they found no incriminating data. I had suspected Joseph from the moment I heard about the incident. However, on that day, he was out of town on business. So he couldn't possibly be the culprit. I had no choice but to accept that. Afterward, Joseph, his parents, and I conducted Maria's funeral. Even when everything was over, I was still in a daze. Unable to do anything. If only I had a husband at such a time, perhaps I could have somewhat eased my loneliness. Why, Maria? I could only mutter to myself. I was feeling helpless. I cried for days, thinking this way. And then, a week after Maria's death, I had to accept the reality of her loss. It was right then that I received a letter. As I flipped over the letter handed to me by the mail carrier, I saw Maria's name on it.
Maria!
I exclaimed out loud, unintentionally. I hurried back to the living room. I wondered why I was receiving a letter from Maria now. There's no use just thinking about it. I carefully opened the letter. Inside were several sheets of stationery. As I took them out and began to read, I pictured Maria's face in my mind. To Mom. The letter explained the circumstances that had led to Maria's current situation. Reading the truth as recounted by Maria, a simmering anger began to bubble within me. Maria detailed how she was deceived by Joseph, how he stole her recipes, and how she was forced into his fraudulent schemes. And at the end, it contained these words. Please avenge my husband for me. That's my final request. Love, Maria. As I finished reading, tears fell onto the table. Overwhelmed with frustration, and nowhere to direct it, I clenched the letter in my hand. At the same time, I resolved to avenge Maria in her stead. Joseph Ford, you were just pretending to be a good person. Not realizing it was my mistake. So, I'll commend you for deceiving me until just now. But that's where it ends. You made a terrible mistake. You took away my beloved daughter, and I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. I bit my lip and reached for my smartphone. I quickly arranged for a taxi. Maria's letter had an address written on it. A place where something important seemed to be.
Maria, this is where you wanted me to go, right?
Clutching the letter, I jumped into the taxi and headed to the address. It was a local bank. According to Maria's letter, there was something in a safe deposit box. I showed my driver's license and explained the situation to the bank staff. And also, the safe deposit box card and key. They immediately escorted me to the box. Maria had apparently told them I would be coming. In the room, I opened the safe deposit box. Inside were documents and a notebook.
What's this?
I quietly began to read. The documents were written by Maria, detailing the fraudulent schemes she couldn't fit into the letter, including the people involved. Also, the notebook was Maria's recipe book, containing recipes for products currently being sold at Joseph's store.
Maria, you did so much.
Just seeing that, I could tell how meticulous Maria was. Thinking of Maria, tears streamed down my face. But I couldn't just sit around mourning. I quickly put the documents and notebook into my bag. That's when I noticed some jewelry. It was a heart-shaped pendant with a yellow sticky note attached.
You shouldn't have treated it so carelessly, Maria.
I muttered as I gently picked up the pendant. Then, my eyes caught the words on the sticky note. Instantly, I was startled. Clutching the pendant tightly.
Maria, I promise I will avenge you. Just wait.
With renewed determination, I left the bank and headed straight to a local cake shop. It was the family business of Maria's best friend, Catherine Edgar. At the shop front, I saw Catherine, whom I had met at Maria's funeral.
Hello, Catherine. Maria's mom? About the other day.
Catherine's expression was still showing her sadness. I nodded in return.
I have something I'd like to talk about. Do you have a moment?
Catherine glanced back. And a man who appeared to be her father nodded.
Then, please come this way.
Catherine led me to the back of the shop. There were their living quarters. I was taken to the living room. As Catherine served tea, I spoke abruptly.
Actually, I received a letter from Maria.
From Maria? Catherine's eyes widened in shock.
Read it first. We'll talk after that.
I handed Maria's letter to Catherine. She read the letter intently. Her tears streaming down her face just like mine had. Soon, she handed the letter back to me.
Thank you. I'll give it back now. What do you think?
I can't forgive them. Not at all. Catherine clenched her fist. I felt relieved knowing Catherine shared my feelings.
Would you be willing to help me then?
Yes. But, what should I do?
You were Maria's best friend, so you must know about this, right?
I took out Maria's recipe notebook from the safe deposit box. Catherine nodded several times.
This was in the safe deposit box.
The moment I saw the contents of the safe deposit box, it struck me as if someone had whispered in my ear. I took it as Maria's wish and decided to use it in my plan to avenge Joseph. I explained the plan to Catherine and entrusted her with Maria's recipe notebook.
Can I count on you?
For Maria, of course. Catherine responded firmly. With that, the first step of my plan was in place. I felt a bit relieved. I stood up and shook hands with Catherine.
Thank you. I'm counting on you.
After saying that, I left her place and headed to another location. It was a branch of the pastry shop where Maria had worked, quite far from the one where Maria was employed. I made my way there. Upon entering the shop, I approached a young woman who appeared to be an employee. Excuse me, is Mr. Broke here? She looked puzzled. So I added. My daughter used to work at another branch, and she was under Mr. Broke's care. I showed her Maria's employee ID card given to me after the funeral. The woman's expression quickly turned to a smile. Soon, Mr. Broke came out from the back. Upon seeing me, his face turned pale, recognizing me as Maria's mother from the funeral. Could we talk outside for a moment? Well, if you refuse, you know what could happen, right? I smiled slyly. And he agreed to follow me. We moved to a nearby park, and immediately Mr. Broke knelt down on the ground. I'm so sorry. I was also threatened. What are you talking about? Well, it's just that. Without me asking, Mr. Broke started spilling everything he had done. He claimed he had only approached Maria because Joseph threatened him. And he hadn't done anything else. He insisted that Joseph was the one who involved him in the wrongdoing. He tearfully apologized to me, saying he never thought Maria would take her own life.
Apologies won't change anything now. Maria is not coming back.
I raised my voice unintentionally. Mr. Broke flinched and fell silent. Realizing I had gone too far, I took a deep breath. Then I looked at him sternly and asked, "If you really want to apologize, will you do me a favor?"
Yes.
Then, please testify about what happened. And don't tell Joseph anything about this, okay? I pressed the point, and Mr. Broke nodded, clearly scared. After that, I made Mr. Broke testify everything. I recorded it all and also had him write a statement and sign it.
That's the second step done. Now it's up to you, Catherine.
I muttered softly as I watched Mr. Broke trudge back to the shop. Sometime later, I received an invitation from Joseph. Sweets exhibition. It was for the very sweets exhibition Maria had written about. Joseph didn't know I was aware of the truth. So, brazenly, the invitation included these words.
We will be presenting the sweets that Maria praised highly. Please come for Maria's sake.
I almost tore it up in anger. But that would ruin all my preparations. I held back and waited for the day of the sweets exhibition, staring at the calendar every day. Finally, the first day of the exhibition arrived. Wearing Maria's employee badge, I headed to the venue. There, Joseph greeted me with a fake smile.
Are you Maria's mother? I'm glad you could come.
Yes.
Maria was looking forward to this, wasn't she? Yes. I have prepared my masterpiece.
He led me to a display of splendid cakes and chocolates. I asked Joseph with a forced smile. Which ones did you make?
This time, I made the chocolates. Valentine's Day is coming up, after all.
Joseph pointed to a chocolate display right in the center. It was a stylishly decorated chocolate. But I knew this was made from Maria's recipe. The thought made me incredibly frustrated. Suddenly, a woman's voice came from behind.
Do you mind if we do an interview?
I turned around to see a woman holding a file. Seemingly a magazine journalist, with a camera in hand. Joseph and the woman continued their exchange. After a while, the woman looked puzzled. Excuse me, are you sure you made this? Joseph looked confused at her question. And then replied with a laugh. Of course I did. What are you talking about? But I saw a similar item at another store, she said.
What? Are you serious?
Joseph raised his voice. It drew the attention of several people at the venue. The woman continued. The explanation and the design are very similar.
That's impossible. Which store is it?
Joseph's voice grew louder. Trembling, the woman pointed towards a distant shop. Joseph quickly rushed off. And I followed him. Soon, we arrived in front of a shop. Catherine was standing there. She nodded slightly at me. And then addressed Joseph.
Long time no see. You stole our shop's recipe. Stolen? That's not true at all.
Catherine smiled. Joseph, red-faced with anger, raised his voice.
Then what's this? It's almost identical to our product.
He pointed to a display of chocolates, remarkably similar to those in his shop. He further pointed to a sign at the storefront and yelled.
And what about this? Doesn't melt easily in warm places.
That's our new product.
Don't joke. That's exactly the same as the unique method I developed.
Joseph's loud voice caused a stir among the onlookers. However, Catherine calmly retorted. That must be a coincidence. But if it's indeed the same, please stop using it at your store.
What do you mean? This chocolate uses a patented method my father developed years ago. Patented method?
Joseph's face turned pale. The truth was that Maria's recipe had used that patented method. But Maria never intended to infringe on the patent, because she planned to sell it together with Catherine.
This recipe was thought up by my best friend, Maria, for when we eventually open our shop together. You stole the recipe from Maria, didn't you?
Joseph fell silent, his gaze shifting uneasily. The woman journalist who had been observing asked. So, did you steal the recipe?
No, Maria was an employee at our store.
Joseph began to stumble over his words. But no one seemed to believe him. Unable to bear the scrutiny of those around him, Joseph quickly left the scene. I hurried after him. The journalist followed me. Soon, Joseph returned to his exhibition space and began to hurriedly pack up, apparently intending to act as if nothing had happened. Unwilling to let him off so easily, I confronted him.
Wait. We're not done talking. I told you Maria provided that recipe. What more do you want? I want the truth. It's not just about the recipe, is it? What are you talking about?
Joseph's forehead glistened with sweat. This was the crucial moment, and I raised my voice.
Your store is involved in tax evasion, isn't it? Eek!
Joseph gasped and covered his mouth. Simultaneously, everyone's gaze focused on him. I began to methodically recount everything he had done, drawing even more attention from the crowd.
First of all, you separated the invoices for pre-ordered items and didn't record them in the sales. What are you talking about? You also fudged the inventory of raw materials. You were evading taxes, weren't you? I don't know what you're talking about.
Joseph tried to shout over me. That's when I pulled out a copy of the documentation Maria had compiled.
Maria outlined all your schemes in detail. Take a good look at this.
I scattered the documents right there. Several people rushed over to pick them up, comparing notes and starting to talk among themselves. Soon, the female journalist questioned Joseph.
What about this? Based on these documents, her story seems to be the truth.
Joseph fell silent in response to her question. Then, similar voices started to rise from the crowd.
I work in accounting, and this is clearly fraud. No doubt about it, it's tax evasion.
Overwhelmed by the accusatory voices, Joseph finally snapped.
Shut up! What do you people know? I haven't done anything. These documents can't be proof.
His outburst silenced the venue. Amidst the quiet, I took out my smartphone and played a certain audio clip.
Listen, make sure to list the inventory lower. But if we do that, don't talk back to me. You can't escape now.
Maria and Joseph's voices echoed throughout the venue. Even the distant guests came closer to listen. The recording continued.
Where are the invoices for today's pre-sales? I destroyed them. They were cash transactions, and it was convenient to fudge the sales. Is that true? Shut up. If we paid taxes properly, we'd never make any profit.
As Joseph's words ended the playback, I saw his face turn ashen.
This recording was in the pendant Maria had. That heart-shaped one? Yes. That was a mini voice recorder. Maria left irrefutable evidence. Ah! It's over!
Joseph crumbled down. At that moment, the security guards at the venue brought police officers. One of the officers looked at both me and Joseph, then asked Joseph, who was slumped in despair. We've heard quite a bit. Is it true that you were evading taxes?
Well, that is...
Well, we'll have a thorough inquiry at the police station. For now, could you come with us, please? The officer gently yet firmly told Joseph, though his eyes were not kind. I handed the officer Mr. Broke's testimony and explained about Maria's tragic end.
Understood. We'll investigate that matter too,
the officer said, casting a stern look at Joseph. By then, Joseph had no strength left to argue. Later, Joseph was arrested on charges of tax evasion and other allegations. Maria's case was also thoroughly investigated. Although Joseph hadn't directly caused Maria's death, he was only charged with assault in her case. Still, his arrest had a significant impact. Within a few months, his father's confectionery company was driven to bankruptcy. Naturally, all the operating stores, including the one where Maria had worked, were closed. The extent of Joseph's sentence was still unknown, but I hoped he would reflect on his actions. After Joseph was taken away by the police, Catherine distributed the chocolates at the venue.
These chocolates were created by my friend,
she said to everyone, wishing Maria could have seen it. Especially the customers enjoying the chocolates with smiles. Thinking of that, tears began to overflow. I don't spare time to cry, though, as the retail sale of the chocolate had been decided.
I want to name the product Maria. Most importantly, it was Maria's idea.
Catherine said with a smile. She then asked me,
Could you write the product's description for the storefront? I want to display it with Maria's photo.
So here I am, for the first time in my life, creating a storefront sign.
I hope Maria would like it.
I said to her, smiling photo before reaching for a chocolate brown colored pencil.